It is 25 degrees Celsius here in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. Good morning and welcome to your daily dose of sunshine, Sunrise Daily. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
Well, it's 24th day of August, but it's 26 degrees here in Lagos. It's a Monday morning. Welcome to the show. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Well, Ayo, on Friday we did see the announcement, or was it on Thursday now? We heard an announcement from the chairman of the ICPC, that's the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission, who told journalists and Nigerians that he had uncovered, or his institution had uncovered, another fake agency in the course of their investigating the PFIPC, which was a phantom agency which the president had asked him to investigate. Well, a few days later, it turns out that we started seeing some more documents from that particular phantom agency, which we now understand has existed for about 16 years. They have been, let's say, speaking up and also releasing documents on social media. It's unclear what the point is, perhaps to show that they had the mandate to operate. But the big questions that really need to be answered as to what exactly, how do committees, for instance, or how do agencies come about? What exactly is the process? Do people come up with proposals and then submit them somewhere? Because for someone to get an office in the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, there are layers of questions to answer. Don't forget that on this particular one, the president ordered that 3 permanent secretaries be suspended as a result of the investigation, which is currently still going on. But clearly, that has not deterred the agency from putting out information showing how it was that they came about. I am sure you must have been seeing some of these documents. But just to refresh our memory, just in case we did not quite hear what it was that the ICPC chair said, here is what he announced, and we come back and tell you some of the documents that we have seen.
So over further brief by ICPC to Mr. President on the ongoing investigations into the fake Presidential Foreign Intervention Prevention Council, PFIPC, and procedural weaknesses in the public service, the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Elected Offences Commission, ICPC, has uncovered another fake agency and office operating under the new National Plans, Development and Mandates in the Nigeria Special Project Office, which had been illegally allocated office space within the premises of the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. The fake agency/office was promoted by one George Buchi Mwagwizi, was active suspected collaborators in the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, contrary to the external laws and without authorization with the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I have briefed Mr. President comprehensively on these new developments. ICPC will continue its investigation. Accordingly, Mr. President has directed as follows: A. Immediate arrest of Prince George Buchi Mwagwizi. B. Immediate suspension of the following permanent secretaries: 1. MS Anjuma. 2. Engineer Nadungu Gagari. 3. Richard P. Pinemwa.
But that was the Director General of the ICPC, the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission, stating their findings into the investigation and also announcing the suspension of 3 permanent secretaries as ordered by the President. But that clearly has not deterred the said executive or national coordinator and executive director, George Nwabweze, from posting and trying to clarify how it was that his office came about. I'm sure that you must have seen some of the documents that have been making the rounds, not just on social media, but also on his X page. What exactly were your thoughts when you saw them?
Very troubling thing. The first thing that came to my mind, Mark, to be very, very honest, is You know, there's one thing that we have always been seeing, and this is perhaps why many people have said that the cost of governance is high. Perhaps we say that not really fully understanding the implications of what we're saying. The multiplicity of agencies of government and departments of government, and not just the ministries. Here's what I mean. This one says it's been granted a special project status, made in Nigeria, brands, whatever. If this is indeed substantive, number one, you asked the question the other time, how do such agencies come about? One would have expected that either by policy statement that would have made the news, or some legislation that would have made that to be, and all of those things. So this one, for instance, if the office of the Secretary to the federal government would have this kind of authority to do this, what then is the need for a Ministry of Trade and Industry? What do we need that for? What do we need Commerce and Industry for if we have if the office of the Secretary to the government of the Federation can, you know, authorize such an agency from coming to be? That's the first thing. The second thing is because when you look at some of the functions under the that the agency claims that it is authorized to do, says that the document listed Nwabweze's responsibilities to include the supervision and development of programs, projects, and policies, supervision of regional and state coordinators across the 36 states, and organization of exhibitions, trade expos, economic summits, and other promotional initiatives aimed at promoting indigenous products and services. So what then do we have the Ministry of Industry for? I am almost certain that, okay, for instance, it says, the letter says, I'm directed to convey the approval, you know, so there was some kind of proposal which was approved of your appointment as National Coordinator and Executive Director of the Made in Nigeria Project Office under the Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. So there are so many questions, and I hope that the people that have been suspended will not just elope out of the country simply because they don't want to answer some questions, because there definitely are questions to answer. Now, secondly, under which ministry, or is the budget office, this project office also funded by the office of the Secretary to the federal government? Now, news says, I mean, this particular individual says that they've been in existence since 2010. Well, that is a bit worrisome, because if they've been in existence for since 2010, that means they have traversed like what, 3 or 4 governments? This is the 16th year, and the government is now uncovering it. It begs questions, Malcolm. I'm almost certain when they said that the ICPC started to investigate these things, the first question that came to my mind is, I expect that we're going to uncover a lot. And I'm almost certain that there are so many of them. 200 and something from what we gathered in the budget, but I'm certain from the word that we got from the budget office under Ben Nwabweze, the federal government has 1,400 and something ministries, departments, agencies, and corporations. How many of them are legal? This is why people say the cost of governance is high. Let ICPC do the needful, and let it not just stop at suspending these fellows. Let us ask them questions, because these are the vulnerabilities that the ICPC is discovering. They traverse not just the federal government, across every state and local government in the country. It's about time we cut the cost of governance through these discoveries, Malcolm.
Some people will say, I think some of the dailies this morning are also tracking what exactly is the situation since the Sanye report was released. They also say it's about 16 years now since or is it 10 years now since the Sanye report was released. The questions as to the move of the federal government, don't forget that the moment the Tinubu administration took over, one of the things they wanted to do was implement the Sanye report, and there was a lot of excitement in the air. What exactly transpired? What killed that drive? Did they find it an impossibility? Was draining the swamp going to be too much of a task? Big questions, really. But it will be very interesting to get an engagement with the Director General of the ICPC, or the Chairman of the ICPC, to know exactly How do agencies like this come about? How do they stay for so long, if indeed they are fake and operating outside of a mandate that has not been given to them by anyone? We'll be asking those questions, and they're not going to remain rhetorical, but we do have other issues which we might add to our discussion on State of the Nation when we come back from this break. Please stay with us. Well, yes, as you've seen there, we are speaking with Professor Abass Ademola, who is a professor of international law, and we're going to be speaking on a plethora of issues this morning, starting from local issues and then also dovetailing into international issues, particularly our relationship now with South Africa, given all that has happened with the xenophobic attacks, the return of Nigerians back home, perhaps even the resettling of Nigerians. But it's good to see you this morning at the start. Yeah, it's still the start of the campaign season for political parties. I'm sure you must be watching very closely what is happening with political parties, and you're also watching what is happening internally as a Nigerian. This earlier discussion myself and Ayo had, which was around the discovery of another fake fake agency. That was the word that they used, and of course the fight back, or I say the pushback by this so-called fake agency. Even though, one would think that if someone has done something wrong, we should be seeing a prosecution, perhaps an arrest and a prosecution thereafter, unless of course investigations are not complete. But right now we do know that 3 permanent secretaries have already been suspended. I don't want to say lost their seats. They've been suspended as a result of what is going on internally. Do you think that we've done enough to drain our swamp? The Americans like to use that term in Nigeria, given what we know has been our history and a big battle that we've had with corruption.
Thank you very much, Mark. And nice to see you again.
Good
it's been
to
a while.
see you too.
Yeah. Thanks. It's a very important question, and I think what is going on with these fake agencies and the reactions by the government and the reactions by the people who are concerned, the fake people, I use fake in quote, who are heading the agencies, raises a lot of questions. The sense that before we even come to whether we are draining the swamp enough, in the sense that we have to be asking ourselves, why do we have fake agencies in government? I mean, this is a government, and I'm not saying this is the first time that such have existed. It might just be the very first time that they have been highlighted for some reasons, or people are now becoming more and more aware and sort of shining their beam lights into those MDAs, as we say, as we use for government, for the ministers and departments and whatsoever, and agencies. So they might have been existing before. So on the one hand, it's a good thing that they are now being brought to the fore, that we have this problem that we have to deal with in the country. And on the other hand, however, it calls into question the integrity of the system in terms of creating agencies. If we come out and we say we have fake agencies in government, look, whether they are real or not, whether that allegation is proved eventually or not, that we even raising it already sort of pseudo-indict the process, as far as I'm concerned, that we shouldn't be talking about fake agencies in that. But in terms of that as it may, we have them, we're dealing with them, we're contending with them. As you've said, 3 permanent secretaries in the latest case have been suspended. But are they going to be prosecuted? It's a good thing that you mentioned the question of investigation. Investigation sometimes takes a long time, and but it would be very nice to know. I mean, Nigerians, know the beginning of all these issues, it would be very nice for them to know how these issues are going to end eventually. They shouldn't be swept under the carpet. I'm not saying they'll be swept under the carpet. There should be accountability at the end of the day. The government should be able to come out and say, you know what, these agencies we said were fake were actually fake. These were the processes that established them, and if there is anybody who's been involved in creating this and that, there should be consequences. And I think part of the reason, and that is coming back to the question of draining the swamp, is that people commit a lot of acrimonious criminality in Nigeria because they know they can get away with it, especially at a certain level. You know, and that is very, very sad for our commentary as a country. The other day, a couple of people phoned me and said, are you aware that Ms. Betta Edu is on the list of the presidential campaign or whatsoever, this and that? What is going on in APC? That why would you suspend a minister and then bring the minister back to be a director in a campaign? What kind of message are we sending? I said, look, I really don't want to get too much involved in that, simply because I don't have the facts in terms of, was she investigated? Was anything found eventually? Was there any culpability? But I know one thing for sure, though, that if a serving minister was suspended from a position because of alleged malpractice or whatsoever, it hasn't been proved. I say alleged because, to the best of my knowledge, it has not been proved yet in a court of law, and I'm a lawyer, because of alleged this and that. Number one, the country needs to know what happened to that allegation. That's number one. Number two, can that person be brought to come and still serve Nigerians? Because whether you are working for a campaign committee or whatsoever, you're still serving Nigerians anyway. Is the government of Nigeria will be elected through the campaign committee whatsoever? And I said to the person, look, sometimes we also be very impatient as a people. The fact that somebody has committed an offense, let's assume that there was an offense committed, even if they've served their term, if they've been convicted and they served their term, does not mean that we have to cast them out into the hellfire, for goodness sake. Nothing stops that kind of person from being brought back to come and serve the people if they've served their time and they've repented their ways.
That's going to be a very controversial one. Now, if nothing has been proven against them, you know, that's a different kettle of fish. There are big questions as to, do we just hide proper investigation under, or will I say conclusive investigation under, it's an ongoing investigation? For instance, she was suspended. The thinking was that there was going to be a proper investigation, and whether or not she was found guilty or she was indicted, you know, would have been brought out to the fore. Nothing, as you said, we did not, that was not conclusive. Which was, will I say, an injustice of some sorts, because now she's hanging in the balance. She's been brought back again in the campaign council, and then there's a big question mark on her personality. So that certainly, I mean, if the person is a convicted felon, for instance, that certainly does not do any justice to a campaign council. There'll be questions as to what exactly are you marketing to Nigerians? Are you marketing corruption? Is this the sort of thing that we want to market to Nigerians? And the APC does have a lot of questions to answer, because in 2015, when the Buhari administration came in, it was very clear what they wanted to fight. Now, the measure to which they fought it is another kettle of fish. But they were very clear that corruption was very much on the mandate. Security, and I think, I'm trying to remember, there were three pillars that their own mandate was hanging on. The Bola Tinubu administration, it looks like it wants to focus largely on the economy, and people have taken it to task on the issue of security, taken it to task on also the issue of corruption, which it doesn't seem to have addressed frontally. So on this particular count, this issue of, and that's why when this issue of implementing the Iran Sanye report came up, people figured, oh, maybe they didn't have to say it frontally. Maybe they intend to do it quietly. But then it does appear that the political will to address something as important as the Iran Sanye report dissipated. And then we now have things like this: discovery of a phantom one, investigation of a minister, and then total silence. So do you think that they need to be a little more frontal with some of these issues that continue to dog them, particularly with particularly in the area of corruption?
Well, thanks. Look, first, before let me jump quickly. When you said that what I said would be controversial, I realize that. But I did say before I said that, though, that Nigerians are owed an explanation. There must be accountability to Nigeria, how the investigations have gone, whether it's in respect of the suspended, the terminated minister, or the fake agencies and this and that. So I realize that, I recognize that. I think what I was trying to say at that point in time was the fact that, look, even when you convict criminals, when they are convicted and they serve their term, you bring them back, you integrate them, there's integration, there's harmonization. What I'm saying is that if the person in question has been investigated, and there's nothing has been found on her, there's nothing says that she cannot be brought back to serve the people. Even if she's been convicted and she served her time and she's repented, I'm saying we cannot say so, therefore we cannot re-engage them. Otherwise, what is the point in correcting somebody when you send them to corrective institutions? But be that as it may, coming back to the question of corruption and economy, you said the current administration is heavily focused on economy, and maybe they should be more frontal also about corruption. Look, we've been very frontal about corruption in Nigeria for many years. As far as I can remember, every government comes and the first mantra is that we are going to fight corruption and this and that. And somebody reminded us that corruption is something that when you fight it, it fights back in different shapes and forms, basically. The fact that I'm not shouting from the top of mountain that I'm doing something does not mean, though, that I'm doing it. Let me give you an example. A lot of people, and look, Nigerians are feeling pain today, no question about it, in terms of some of the economic choices and this and that policies that have been implemented by the government. But look, and I'm not an apologist for the government. I'm a Nigerian, I speak as a Nigerian. But I do understand also that when you do reform in any country, reforms are very, very consequential. They're very, very impactful. And some of the short-term impact will be adverse on the recipients. Whether you like it or not, as Nigerians, we have to face the fact that we have lived for many decades well above our means. At a point in time in this country, we were importing toothpicks into Nigeria. At a point in time, we were using almost 92% of our GDP to service debt. No country can survive that. So if a government comes in and says, you know what, I am going to roll back on this road. I am going to start implementing policies, which will not be popular. Let's be honest with you, very effective policies, sometimes they're not very popular. That is why most effective CEOs will never win popularity contests among their employees anyway, because the employees see the short term, but CEOs effectively see the long term. I may say as a president, and I'm not holding brief for any particular president, I may say, you know what, I'm going to roll back on subsidy, I'm going to implement ABC, I'm going to float Naira on the market to go and compete with other currencies, instead of legislating how much dollar that I don't manufacture here will sell for. Now all those things are going to take time for the fruits to begin to come. And because we are used to a particular way of life and way of living as a people, we don't want that. The most difficult thing to change in people's is their habit, is their culture. And the way we live, the kind of money we were exposed to before, the kind of life we were spending, importing everything, this and that, any small pause on that is going to be resisted anyway. I am not saying the government shouldn't have done more. For instance, the three candidates that in the last election campaigned on removal of subsidy, they all agreed that it should be removed. The question we should be asking is that why did the government not put enough cushioning effects measures when the subsidy was going to be removed? That is why people are feeling, nobody can tell me the subsidy removal was a bad thing. Nobody can tell me today that floating Naira is a bad thing and making sure that Naira is going to compete is a bad thing as far as I'm concerned. And I traveled, you were in Osogbo, you said, I was in Osogbo for the elections as an example, and I saw some road being done on concrete, and that has been replicated. Whether you like it or not, there is a movement. But what I'm saying is that I don't need to shout as a government. But the question is now, even if I'm not shouting, if I'm doing something underground beneath, can it be seen that I'm really doing something? And that is where the pivotal question comes in. For instance, if I would answer that question, is the government doing enough as far as corruption is concerned? No government in the world is doing enough. In Africa especially, let me say, we do enough as far as corruption is concerned, because to do enough is to stop being corrupt as a people, as a country. And I think the only country that has come anywhere close to that in terms of fighting will be China, where they use public execution.
Yeah, but in Africa there are examples. Botswana has been a shining light in that regard, and I think it's been commended over and over again. You even have Cape Verde, I think. So you have a few African countries that have managed to still stay above board in such a way that people can say, come on, there's nothing wrong with your continent. It's not a continental problem. They're pointing to them and say, why can't you follow their example? I'm just a little curious as to, anyways, let me go instead. Let me go, because this conversation is going up. It's not supposed to be focusing largely on corruption this morning. We're talking about the findings of the fake agency, and it would seem the lack of will, so to speak, to implement something as important as the Oran-Sanye report, which its administration had initially come in. It was a big buzz. There was a lot of conversation around it. We even invited people who should know, Bureau for Public Service Reforms, they were very excited about it because they were a part of the people who came up with the ideas for it. And after a while, all talks around it fizzled out. What do you think needs to be done for us to go back to that conversation? Do you think that this period of campaign is also a time that we can focus on conversations like that, to even ask perhaps what exactly made this particular administration shy away from it, and maybe the other candidates, what they think about the report?
Well, I think that would be a very good question to ask, to be honest with you. Unfortunately, I don't work for the government, and I can't be their spokesperson because I don't know why they prioritized it during the campaign and they shifted away from it after they came in. But one thing I know, though, for a fact, having worked in a government myself before, at Lagos State, albeit at a state level, is the fact that, you know, as an executive, when you are coming into office, you have certain priorities on your list. But when you get to office, when the reality of certain things hit your face, hit you right in the face, you are forced, and I'm not saying that is the case here, I'm just saying that it's a probability that you are forced to rejig your list and then to reprioritize. You know, so it's possible, I'm thinking, that might be the reason. But as I said, you are journalists. I think that is where journalists should be able to, the media should be able to take the lead. You know, there are going to be debates, hopefully, of all the presidential candidates. That it's a question that, and I don't think this will be the first government that has failed to actually implement, and that's about 12 years.
It's interesting. It's 14 years now, but it's interesting that they did not campaign on it. It was when they came in that they announced that they were going to implement it. So it's one thing for you to campaign and come and say that, okay, there's a different reality. But when you come into office and one of the things you announce that you want to do is implement this, and then everyone is excited and all of a sudden nothing.
It's the same thing will still apply, Malpe, in the sense of whether you campaign on it or when you came into office, you said you are going to do it. You know, it's not you review as a government. When I was in government, we review constantly. And there were a couple of things. I'll give you, I was doing a couple of things yesterday on issue of South Africa as an example. I was party when my former boss, Governor Kumambode, had a fantastic meeting with the mayor of Govt in South Africa to have a kind of twining of Lagos, and it was a fantastic idea in terms of, you know, and we did it with Boston in the US. I was part of the team that went to South Africa. I was there in the US. But it didn't go beyond that. Why? That was when, and we're going to be talking about the issue of xenophobia. That was when the whole issue of xenophobia became very, very big thing, and they were not even giving visa to Nigerians. As a governor of Lagos State, or any state in Nigeria for that matter, why would I want to do, you know, an investment deal with you when my investor will not be able to travel to your country freely and this and that? It doesn't make any sense. So the governor paused. He did a pause on that. We didn't go to the media to campaign to explain why it was paused. I'm not saying we shouldn't have. I'm saying we didn't. Some people should be wondering, why didn't this thing go any further? So what I'm saying is that you might have a party, and that was on the front burner for Akinwambode's government. You know, investment was on front burner. I headed a particular agency called Lagos Global, and we had a lot of initiative, but a lot of things came in that some of those things were paused. That was an example for you.
Well, I do know that conversation now is dovetailing to South Africa, and there's xenophobia that has now come up and, you know, marred relations somewhat. I'm sure Ayo would like to continue on that thread. Ayo, over to you.
Thank you, Malpe. There are a number of other issues to take him up on just before we go abroad. But before then, let's bring in Professor Taiwo Ojo, who is also a professor of strategic leadership, to also join in this conversation and see how we can take it further. Prof, thank you so much for joining us this morning. One of the issues that Professor Abass is speaking about is pretty much talking about cost of governance, particularly in the light of this discovery of a fake agency. First of all, what are your own thoughts about that discovery, and how do you see it taking us further?
Thank you for having me, Ayo. Good morning, Malpe, and glad to see Professor Abass. Very brilliant interview. You know, to take it from where he stopped, institution makes a whole lot of things easier. You know, in Africa, we've been discussing about corruption for years, but we have forgotten that human being, flesh, is weak. So how do you curtail flesh from committing sin? You take care of their welfare. You take care of their business. You know, Abraham Maslow theory of this spoke about survival. If you don't take care about the survivor, you might not be able to resolve corruption, because corruption is a sinful nature. All of us. So how do you fight against it? You can't eradicate corruption. You can only mitigate it by building systems and institutions. And one thing I would give, I know governance is a continuum. One thing I would give this government, they started well because they wanted to go back to Orosaye report, but Nigeria is damn too complex. If you govern a state, it's very easy to make some changes. The country is going through reform now. Everybody is shouting. Because that's the nature of human being. But when China, when South Korea, when India started their own in the early 90s, when China started their reform in late 80s, they went through it for like 25, 30 years. And all of us are seeing China, India growing today. When are we going to go through our reform?
Well, just 1 second, Prof. Just a second. Both of you have raised two very important, one very, very important thing. And I'll take Prof on it first. He has, Professor Abass, you have spoken, Professor Abass, about the fact that, there is a communication that should have gone out to the people from the Ambode government at the time, but you did not do it. You said you didn't think it shouldn't have been done, but it was not done. That is what leaves the gap, I think. When government does not communicate, or when government does not communicate enough, that's where the problem is. I don't know what your thoughts are about that. You have a Ministry of Information, but you do not have a ministry that communicates with the people. That back and forth between the people and the government. That is one of the things that leaves out that gap. And Professor Ojo, I'll come back to you on one of the other issues you raised. But Professor Abass, what are your thoughts on that? Government needs to communicate better so that people can take ownership.
Ayo, thank you very much, and thanks a lot. Nice seeing you again. Look, you've hit a nerve there, and you see, funny enough, the government is communicating, but they are having the wrongest communication, if I can use that particular phrase. As a government, you should focus on your policies. What are you doing? Feed people. Let people understand. Let's look at the most banal kind of explanation this government could be doing. You're doing a lot in terms of road corruption or construction. You're doing a lot in terms of this, your effort in security, and so on and so forth. Do people know? In terms of reforms, do people have the government been able to sit back and tell people, tell your people to come out and say, let them explain to people why reforms will be painful in a very short term. Break it down for them. I use these examples that if you've been using 10 naira per day because your dad could afford it, giving you 10 naira per day when you are going to school, and suddenly your dad, couldn't afford more than 1 naira per day, it's going to affect a lot of things. But to be in short term though, because your dad is hoping that eventually he's going to be able to afford 10 naira per day for you. People are likely to sympathize and to understand. That child is able to understand what he or she is going through at that point in time. But when you do not do that, when you don't do that is where the problem comes in from. Basically, in terms of why this has happened. So the government doesn't communicate. They do, but they do the wrongest kind of communication.
Prof, just a second. On that same issue, my apologies. Prof, information is not communication. Giving people information and getting people to own that information and be able to get feedback from the people and respond to them accordingly, they are two different things. That's where I think the problem is. You've talked about the fact that reforms are painful and all of that. On the one hand, government says they understand, but is the feedback from the people also being taken? Because whether we like it or not, it is going to be a crucial issue for any government, during these elections. And even the state governors themselves that aren't doing as much as people perhaps expect them to do, they need to answer questions from the people. But that is what seems not to be happening, Prof.
I think we are saying the same thing, therefore, despite the semantic differences. What I'm saying is that government believes it's communicating because it's talking to people. There's a difference. I rather take when you say there's a difference between talking with people and talking to people. They're two different things entirely. The government is talking to people. They should be talking with people. You talk to them, you get their feedback. You let them know what is going on. As an example, how could you suspend a minister from the country, remove them from their position, without informing the people what has happened since then? Has there been an investigation? Has it been concluded? Has there been a kind of formal indictment or whatsoever? If you didn't do that and suddenly you brought back the minister to come and start functioning on the council, whether you like it or not, if the president is re-elected, that minister will have worked on a council that is going to serve the whole of Nigeria. So Nigerians need to know, why was this person brought back as an example without us being informed? That for me is what is lacking.
Okay.
What about the policy choice of the government? Why don't you explain to the people why
we'll come back to that
in a bit. What will be the
bit.
effect of the policies in the short term and in the long term?
Yes, we'll come back to that in a bit. Professor Ojo, you talked about, governance being a continuum and all of that. And you said governance is complex. Everyone would agree with that. But then, one of the safeguards of government is bureaucracy. It is expected that because the process of getting anything done in government is stringent, such fake agencies should never have been at all, should never be a thing. So it probably then means to some people that this whole idea of government bureaucracy, slow wheel of government moving, is really, really not as airtight or as stringent as we expected it would be, Prof.
Thank you. Bureaucracy is very good. It started from Britain, Whitehall, when they colonized us. There's a reason why they put bureaucracy. We teach in the universities. You go through different set of process to reduce corruptive tendencies of human being. So sometimes it could be slow, sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative. And secondly, just to respond to the campaign council, because I saw the feedback from the young lady, the former minister, and the one other woman, Lord Jemen. Those things will always happen because it's politics. Politics is emotional. There are some people there that what they are doing is not what everybody that wants development is looking at to do. There will be on and off. But one lesson I want to give this government, one advice: focus on the policy. You have a very good policy. The reform that you are running. I said President Abass just started this reform in 2003. We were in telecoms then then. He started this reform, but the reform was stopped when Yar'Adua took over, and Nigeria went back again. Now, President Tinubu started this reform. Now, focus on your policy in the manifesto. I saw different names on those lists. There's some good names there, but there's so many people that are not supposed to be on that presidential campaign list. But because of politics, just to say that we recognize what you have done, no problem. Some might not even do anything all through the campaign, but just to satisfy the emotional needs of political gain, which is good. But focus on your policy. What are you doing? Governance is all about development. Politics is about policy. How do you move people from point A to B within short term, 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, 16 years, and 20 years? The government has started well. Everybody is going through the pain. Professor Abass said this: you were earning 10 naira before, now it has dropped to 1 naira. It will affect you because it's human being. It will affect you, but can you communicate simply? Simplicity is one of the greatest problems we have in our culture. In our culture in sub-Saharan Africa, everything is about complex. Everything is complex. Everything is big. Everything is gigantic, which is not supposed to be. Make your policy simple. You are doing road development, you are doing economy, you are doing this. Make it simple. Explain to people, go to zones, make it zonal. Don't make it national. Explain to people, let them know why the reform is taking place, so that the country can benefit. I told us, I started with China, I started with India, how they went through their reform in the last 30 years. India is like Nigeria. Most Nigerians, they look at those countries, they believe is El Dorado. Everything is working in America. Everything is going on in Canada. It is a lie. They too, they are going through their own stress. But our own situation in Nigeria is very peculiar because we focus more on politics and we leave the policy. Now, taking me back to the state government and the local government, our structure, which is the military structure, no matter what you do at the federal, the state government and the national and the local government, they will never allow you to do well because of the structure of survival.
Okay.
Everybody
we'll come back to that because there are those who also believe that some other issues, particularly that relate with the state and local government, the subnationals, it's going to determine a lot of how people will vote during the 2027 elections. That and a number of other issues we'll bring up when we return from this break. Please stay with us. Well, it's our continuing conversation as we build up to the 2027 elections. Professor Ojo, I'll bring this to you, and then I think maybe Professor Abass may want to talk to the same issue. Cost of living is going to determine a lot in the coming elections, both at the federal level and at the state levels. Yes, we know that a number of times the federal government has pointed at the state governments and said, guys, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to make governance more relatable to your people, you need to find a way to cushion the effect of whatever on your people. But then what we have right now is people are still complaining about cost of living. Inflation numbers may be going down, but inflation has not been eradicated, Professor Abass. So how do you see that affecting things? What should government be doing? Because whether we like it or not, it is going to be an issue.
Thank you very much, Ayo. Look, there is no running away from the fact that government needs, as a matter of urgency, to address the crisis of cost of living. I call it a crisis because it's really a crisis. And we shouldn't shy away from that. It doesn't matter on which divide of the political linings that you are in, whether you are PDP, APC, NDP, NDC, RIP, whatever you are, is really unimportant to me. As a Nigerian, you must be feeling the brunt. Even if you're a billionaire, you're having a dip in your wealth. So the government needs to do something. But then what does the government need to do? Look, Nigerians they're not asking for a lot. Nigerians don't need a lot. The vast majority of Nigerians just want a situation in which you give them, their basic entitlement as a people. We pay tax in this country, for God's sake. You want your kids to be able to feed. As a person, you want to be able to provide for your family. You want to be able to, come back home, have an energy, have, water, have the most basic functionalities of a society. You want to be able to have all those, at your beckon as a person. We're not asking for much. You want to have security in the country. Almost every government, since I've come of age, has campaigned rigorously on the need to secure Nigerians and this and that. And we are all very nostalgic about the past, about the 70s and 80s when we could walk, when we could amble out without being scared of anything whatsoever. So it's not just a question of giving people food to eat. I mean, what is the value of food that I'm eating? And I know somebody can just barge through my door and kidnap my children, for goodness sake, or kidnap my wife or my husband or whatsoever. So government needs to look at the whole thing. It's a holistic, with a holistic perspective. I did mention earlier on, for instance, that, look, removing the subsidy is not the problem. We needed to remove that anyway, but what are you doing with the money that we save from the subsidy? Why are people being left a bit behind, whether you like it or not, when people are not feeling the dividends of democracy, and you're asking them as a people? And I think that is one of the moral challenges for this government, and I'll say it openly on air. Why I support fully the administration of Ahmed Tinubu's reforms, because it's high time actually we began that when he came in. And I like the boldness, the vision, the courage to be able to pursue those reforms. The most important thing, though, is why did the government not think thoroughly about what we need to do to the people to make sure people are comfortable with it? On the one hand, the government is saying, Nigerians, tighten your belt. But what we see around, actually, as a people, is that the government is living large. Whether at the federal level or state level or local government level, government is just living as if they were living pre-1999, pre-democratic era. And that is there's a moral challenge for the government, whether you like it or not. And it's high time somebody brought that back to the government attention. That you can't continue to ask a people that there is austerity, tighten your belt. We are going to go in for it. Just like, you are in a plane and you see your captain is announcing, we are going to enter turbulence now, everybody fasten your seatbelt. And you fasten your seat, but then you see the captain coming out of his cockpit, put you on autopilot, and he's drinking champagne. You're thinking, you can't be serious. And that is the issue. That is the analogy. That is the way Nigerians are beginning to look at the government. That you can't tell us to tighten our belt, to prepare for the inevitable, so to say, consequence of this reform, why you are living large, why your appointees are living large, why they are living as if they are not in the same country. That has to be addressed. So it's high time the government began to focus on that, because at the end of the day, as you've said, it's going to be a critical issue at this campaign. And let's not kid ourselves. The coming election will be like none that we've ever seen. Because for the first time, people are going to come out and actually vote in a way that will make... Look at Oshun. I said I was in Oshun. I was in Oshobo. And I think Marco said you were in Oshobo as well. Whether you like it or not, we could do any analysis about Oshobo. And there are many analyses you could do. Why APC lost in Oshobo. Sorry, I have to mention that because it's a big party. It was on ground and this and that. Look, as far as I'm concerned, APC lost for two principal reasons in that particular election. Number one was a very strategic reason, strategic sloppiness, in which you went and chose your candidate from a constituency that doesn't have the demography. As an example, you cannot look. The ruling governor came from Ede, which is one of the largest voting constituency, and you are in the opposition. That's APC in Osun. You went to bring somebody from Irewole local government. You cannot use Irewole vote, which is not up to one local government in Ede, to have somebody from Ede. It's a strategic sloppiness. But beyond all those, and you talk about it's a question of leadership also at a particular level of the APC leadership in Osogbo, for instance, which has alienated a lot of voters. And that we're talking about governance here. You cannot come and campaign to people to vote for you 4 years after, when, for instance, and I'm talking about Governor Yetola, when he was there as an example, you are in a particular, you are in a government, you didn't pay salary regularly, you didn't pay people their pension, then you came out, that people will not come and vote for you. It's not going to happen. People are going to rebel against that. So for me, that's one part. The second issue is a serious issue of governance. Osun people saw governance, or semblance of it, in Adeleke's government. I listened to people what they were saying. I don't care which party you belong to, but I listened to Osun people. They say, you know what? This was a governor who's been very available to us. He's accessible. He mixes with us. He pays our salaries. He takes care of civil servants. And that is where the level of arrogance. When somebody from a particular party will come out and say, you don't need civil servants to win an election. You already lost it. So those are things that the government will have to take on board, because you have to learn the lessons. If you don't learn the lessons, then you are making a fundamental mistake. So this government needs to do a lot to Nigerians before they go to polls. And don't do it just because you are going to the polls, because that would be, living a lie. Do it because seriously you understand the challenges of an average Nigerian. And Nigerians are not asking the government for a lot. It's just something basic. Come on. You're talking about a country that pays 70,000 naira in 21st century. That cannot even fuel. You can't even buy, 15 liters. And do you know what kind of
petrol
SUVs, senators, House of Rep members are using and other people? Do you know how much they used to fill the tank in a single day? Ordinary Nigerians are not asking for anything up to what a senator or a minister will use to fill their tank. An average Nigerian is not asking more than half of that for the whole month to survive with a family of 2 or 3.
Well, it's usually quite a challenge when you bring on two professors to discuss, state of the nation issues. The conversation goes sometimes how you do not plan, and the things that you sometimes plan, you don't even get there. Prof, it looks like we'll have to find time to bring you again, because this issue of the lessons from our relationship now with South Africa, we didn't even touch on it at all. I do know that you have a very unique perspective on it. We have to thank you very much for coming on the program, as well as Professor Ojo. We have to thank you, Professor Taiwo Ojo, for coming on as well. Professor Taiwo Ojo is a professor of strategic leadership, and Professor Abass Ademola is a professor of international law. Thank you both for coming on the program this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Well, this is where we wrap up the program this beautiful morning on Sunrise Daily. Clearly, this week is going to be about the campaigns, and the campaigns are issues that affect you. These are the issues that we intend to take on as we proceed in the week. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Maope Ogunyiso.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. It's still a dose of sunshine. Enjoy the rest of your day.